Now we're going to do an experiment which involves quite hot water. It's not boiling, but it will be quite hot, so you do need an adult with you to help supervise and make sure everything's safe. Now over on the left here I have the scales that measure in kilograms, and on the right I have the scales which measure in grams. Now if you only have the one, that's perfectly okay, you can manage by juggling them about, but because we've got the two, it's much better for your maths, so I'm going to use the kilogram ones and the gram ones. Now what I'm going to do is to put about 200 grams of water, cold water, into this glass. Now I have a jug of cold water here, that's straight out of the fridge, and you'll remember that first of all I have to zero the scales so that we don't have to worry about the weight of the glass. So now I'm going to put as close as I can get to 200 grams in there. Don't worry too much if you can't read the scale, I can read it for you. 149, 163, 179, 194, 199. Can I get it exactly 200? 201. Well, never mind, that's close enough. And I'm going to measure the temperature of that water. We'll leave that in there for a moment and see what it reads. Okay, well that's reading 9 degrees Celsius. Now I'm going to take some water out of the kettle. It hasn't boiled, but it has been heated quite hot. And I'm going to try and get 200 grams in here. Press the zero. Now because this is the kilogram scale, it's going to be reading 0.201 or something very close to it. You might not be able to see this scale on the video, but don't worry, I can tell you what it is. It's 0.186 at the moment. 0.204. I've just gone over the top a little bit. So I'll take a try and drop out. 0.198. 200 grams. There we go, that's close enough. 0.199. I'm happy with that. And we measure the temperature of that water, put the thermometer in there, the right way up. And I'm going to leave that in there for a few seconds to warm up. And there it is, almost exactly 50 degrees, believe it or not. So now I'll mix the two together. With a bit of a stir just to make sure it's all mixed up nicely. And measure that temperature. Now this time I'm not going to tell you what the answer is, because I want you to do this for yourself. So we had the temperature of the cold water, we had the temperature of the hot water, and somewhere on there is the temperature of the mixture. Now please write them all down, and then we're going to repeat the experiment using some ice, and then I'll tell you what to look for at the end. Now I hope you've written down the results from the water experiment, because we're going to repeat the experiment, but this time we're going to use ice instead of cold water. And as there were quite a lot of numbers to remember last time, it's much better if you put them in your book. Now I've had the thermometer in here for a little while now, because it takes a few minutes for the temperature on the thermometer to drop right down to its correct result. And I have read it, so I'm going to remove the thermometer now. I'm not going to tell you what that result was, because I'd love you to do this experiment for yourself. Now what I'm going to do is to put about 200 grams of ice into this glass. Now because ice comes in lumps, it might not be possible to get exactly 200 grams, but we do the best we can. So the first thing I have to do, of course, is zero the scales. We'll also put on the kilogram scales for the water, and in goes the ice. I have to say, it doesn't matter how old I get, I still love doing these experiments, you know. I'm sure you all really enjoy them. 136, 173, 205. If I take one out, 194, I think we'll leave that one in. So 205 grams of ice in the glass. So I'm going to try and match that with the hot water. Now because it's kilograms, that will be 0.205. Well, that's 0.170. 0.215. I've overdone it a little bit. Let me take out a little. 209, 203, 204, 205. There we are, exactly the same. Put that on one side. Now we need to measure the temperature of the warm water. So I'll put that in there and leave it for a second. Okay, it's now reached its highest value, and again, I'm not going to tell you what that is because I want you to find out for yourself. So take that out of there. Now we're going to mix the ice with the warm water, just as we did the cold water before. And we want the ice to melt as quickly as possible, or as much of it as possible too. So we give a little stir. I'll do this for a moment or two. Oh, it's melting very quickly actually. And we'll put the thermometer in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep stirring it for a moment and then measure the temperature. Now when you've done that, what I want you to do is to look at the results that you had for the water. Remember, you had three temperatures. You had the hot water temperature, you had the cold water temperature, and you had the temperature of the mixture. And I want you to look to see if the temperature of the mixture is closer to the high temperature, or closer to the cold temperature, or is it roughly in the middle. And then I want you to do the same with this. Is the temperature of this, once it's been stirred and we've read the temperature properly, is it closer to the temperature of the hot water, or is it closer to the temperature of the ice, or is it somewhere roughly in the middle? And when you've compared the two answers, I'd like you to try and explain what's happening. So enjoy that, it's really good fun, but remember, do have an adult with you when you do this experiment, because that water can be very hot.